Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and I am so excited that we are continuing with our series, doing these deep dives with various teachers, healers, and authors. And the first 3 weeks of this, we were primarily focused on Reiki, although last week Nicholas did give us some information about crystals as well, including his new book, Crystals for Psychic Self Defense. However, this week we're taking a little pivot into the realm of intuition. Now, I do want to let you know that there are more Reiki episodes coming up for those of you who are wondering, but intuition, as you know, I really strongly believe goes hand in hand with our practice of Reiki, and there are so many reasons why. But the guest that we have this week, many of you will recognize because we sat with her about 2 years ago. Her name is Eboni Banks. She is an intuitive coach, an intuitive mentor. She is an author, and she is clairtangent. Now, that may be what you remember her from because she spoke to us a lot about clairtangency in our first episode with her, which was very interesting to a lot of you because it is something that a lot of Reiki practitioners experience, and yet none of us knew that there was a name for this. So, in this week, we will talk all about intuition, including her new book, Your Intuitive Nudge, a step-by-step guide to connecting with your intuition. The book comes out in December of 2025. However, you can already pre-order the book, and the link is down in the show description. So, to get us started in today's conversation, Eboni and I talk about the levels of intuition. She also helps us understand how intuition is information and guidance. In fact, I would say throughout this week, throughout these 3 conversations, she really does help us widen our understanding of what intuition is, how to integrate it in our daily lives, and why it can be so important and impactful for our own self-healing as well as working with others. So, in this first episode, she will share with us about her intuitive journey, her own intuitive awakening, and how Reiki really did play a part in that. There's so much that we get to explore with her, including how this work can really help us create shifts in our reality. So, I hope you enjoy part 1 of this 3-part conversation with Eboni Banks, and you can learn more about Eboni and her work at bodywayintuition.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at bodywayintuition. Okay, lovebirds, sit back, relax, and I will see you on the other side. Okay, you all asked for her. We are back again with the beautiful Eboni Banks. And now she is the, we'll say, founder of Bodyway Intuition. Eboni, thank you for agreeing to do this 3-hour series, but it's so nice to reconnect with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I can't believe I haven't been on here since 2023. Time has gone so quickly and
Yes.
so much has changed. So much has
Yes.
and is changing. It's continuing to change. So
You know
lots to
what?
share.
I actually, not right off the bat, but we're going to talk about that. How even your intuition helped you allow certain pivots in your life
Yes.
because yeah, I want to make sure that we do talk about that as well, so people understand all the different ways we can use intuition. So I will say, those that have been listening to the podcast for a while, you will remember Ebony because everyone was excited about what you shared, especially about the clairs. And now we have 3 hours with you, so we're really going to dive in.
Yes.
So
And
for
can I just say to your
yeah.
audience, thank you for welcoming me and like being so interested in what I have to share. So it's so generous of them,
Yeah. Well,
generous.
listen. Yeah. And the thing is, though, that's why I feel like we're so lucky in this community that people are willing to share so that we can all grow and learn. And
Yeah.
just to put that out there, we will be talking about Ebony's new upcoming book, Your Intuitive Nudge, a step-by-step guide to connecting with your intuition. So you've been doing a lot since we last spoke,
So much.
so much. I really want to start this conversation with you with having a deeper understanding for all of us.
Hmm.
You say that there are different levels to intuition. So, could
Hmm.
we start by just talking about why you believe intuition is important for all of us to be aware of? But then,
Hmm.
what are these different levels?
Yes. So the way I understand intuition is it's just information. I think that's a really basic way for people to kind of make it accessible because it's an abstract way of receiving information, you know? So, and the reason it's so valuable is because it is information, in the same way that whatever information we learn from being formally educated, K to 12, college, life, whatever it is, right? Your intuition is giving you information in that same way. However, this information is even more valuable because it connects to, well, a couple of things because of one, how it comes to you, right?
Mhm.
Intuition uses the entirety of our life experience to share information with us. And so for that reason, like it knows us well. I mean, it's us. So it's you know you well, I guess I'll say,
Yeah.
right? So nothing can guide you better than you. Nothing outside of you can command your attention more than you can. And so it's a really like powerful way to connect with yourself and to allow yourself to receive information about your own life, your truths,
Yeah.
right? That you may or may not express outwardly. It's a way to receive all that information based on what is true for you that maybe no one else even knows. So that's why I think intuition is so important. And those truths relate to every area of our life. It can guide us in every single thing from, what home we want to buy to, you know, how we want to move at work to, I mean, everything. It's not just related to our spiritual life. It's about our life. It is information that helps guide our entire life, you know.
Y- Ebony, it sounds like you're saying we have our own internal Google. That's what is coming to mind. Like we have a very much this personalized Google. So I have to ask, even for you,
Mhm.
is when you work with your intuition, do you tend to come to yourself with questions, or
Hmm.
is it just that information drops in? Is it both? How does that work for you?
That's a good question. It's both. Things that I tend to be more challenged by and like my own biases and things don't let me see as
Yeah.
truthfully, I will prime my intuition by asking myself a question,
Yeah.
because we all have things that we are more likely to be aware of in ourselves and about how we behave and what we're doing and things that we're less likely to be in our truth about, right?
Yes.
So for me, when it's something that like I know I have a hard time with in myself, I will ask just to prime it. But most of the time it's just showing up, on its own. It's just showing
Yeah.
up on its own, because as information, I kind of think about it in the same way that like we are able to see, right? Because with us having vision, we like light, from the cosmos hits our retina, right?
Yeah.
Hits the back of our retina, and then voila, like we're able to see. We have vision.
Yeah.
And it's kind of information like that, So the information is everywhere. It's
Yes.
everywhere. It's inside of you. It's what you're guided to. It's what you're noticing outwardly. It doesn't exist in like just one place. It exists everywhere. The part to be mindful of is that our awareness is what dictates how we receive the information.
Mm.
Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
because some people are more aware of like what's going on with them in their inner world. And so that's how it's going to speak to that person, probably, the majority of the time. Some people are more aware of what they notice and what they see outwardly in the outer world or what they hear
Yeah.
so that's how it would show up for that person. There's really no limit to how your intuition can show up. It's really about knowing yourself and how you receive and how you process information.
Yeah. So it's like it will translate for us in ways we will personally understand. So to that point, it kind of goes back
Hmm.
to even what you're saying. It sounds like there's a getting to know ourselves
Hmm.
in this process of working with intuition. So we're not necessarily trying to work with it in a mirrored way as someone else. So I wouldn't say, "Oh, Ebony, this is how she can translate," and so then I start to focus on that must be the only way
Right.
because maybe that isn't going to work for me.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all so unique and so different. Of course,
Yeah,
there's lots of overlap,
yeah,
right?
yes,
Because as much as we are alike, we are different. And so
yeah,
there will be a lot of overlap, but it teaches you so much about yourself. And that's another reason that goes back to your question about why is it important?
yeah,
Because we have these very limited perspectives of who we are, what we're capable of, based on all the things we tell ourselves that have, about ourselves based on how we've lived our lives and what has happened in our lives.
yeah.
And those things are conscious and subconscious, right? So it's really important to get to know yourself in this really loving way and expand like what you are capable of based on what you are actually proving to yourself just by your lived experience with your own intuition, you know?
Yes. Well, even you saying that too, it points directly to this challenge that a lot of people have with
Mm,
trusting their intuition. And, you know, you said the word loving, like getting to know ourselves in a loving way. And I was thinking, like, it's interesting all the stories of why we don't trust ourselves or how we haven't developed that loving relationship
mhm,
to trust ourselves.
mhm,
So I wanted to ask you your relationship with that, like with
mhm,
you learning to trust your own intuition or people you've worked with.
mhm.
Just can you talk a little bit? Because people are wondering, I know, how do I get to the trust part?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was such a long journey because, I'm a trauma survivor and I
Mm,
didn't trust myself in a million ways,
yeah,
and it wasn't a fun journey either. It was really hard for me. I went through depression for, I think, maybe 2 years,
right.
and I didn't know I was depressed until
Mm,
like I came out of it, and like was reflecting. So, it was really difficult for me. So, for people who are not trauma survivors, they probably won't have as difficult a time as I did,
mm-hmm.
but luckily I'm so highly intuitive
Yeah,
that like it worked, like I
yeah,
was able to like pull myself out. Um, so trusting yourself, it really starts with small things. And it's really the best way to start because it is something that will develop over time. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to say,
right,
"Oh, I want to trust myself," and then tomorrow you do. It's not going to happen like that.
right.
And it will depend on every person's individual relationship with themselves, like the pace of their ability to trust themselves more and to get to a point where they're trusting like everything without question, because intuition is so abstract, you know, and it can definitely make you question if what you are receiving and how you are understanding it is true and accurate because it's something you didn't think about. It will provide a window into a perspective that your brain did not think about,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And so once we start to like receive that, you might immediately go into your brain and then tell yourselves all the ways this cannot be true and it cannot happen and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So it takes time to develop like that trust. And so the reason I say to start with small things, like small practical things in your everyday life, like if you want to drink, I don't know, is that a good one? What I was going to say, I'll just say it. Like if you
Okay.
drink X amount of glasses of water a day, right? Like just trust that in your ability to do that. If there's anything small that you want to accomplish in your day-to-day self-care routines, like just making sure that you trust yourself to like accomplish those things that day,
Yeah.
you know, without without thinking that, you're too overwhelmed by something unexpected that came. And so you can't, you don't have the energy, the whatever to do the thing. Like really just trusting yourself that, of course I can do it. Yeah, I had a hard day and maybe
Right.
feel like it energetically. I don't feel like going to the gym. I don't feel like doing whatever is going to be helpful to me in this moment. But like, do it
Yeah.
anyway. So those small ways are really helpful because it it connects our relationship with our inner self and our outer self.
Yeah. I
You know,
love this, Ebony, because it's really highlighting, again, I think sometimes we isolate and think, how do I trust myself intuitively, not even recognizing maybe I don't trust myself in general.
right?
So it's just that bigger picture of how do I learn to trust myself, even with the little things, as you say,
Hmm.
and that will also just naturally opening us up to not being as suspicious of our
Right.
intuition. So I have to ask you this though, as you were opening up intuitively, and there is that questioning, is this real? Is this right? Did you
Yes.
ever have to do things to give yourself evidence? Like, how did you,
Huh. That's a good
like,
question.
yeah, like say if you picked up
Mm.
something about a person,
Hmm.
did you have to go out on a limb and just say it, even if you were nervous about, are they gonna think I'm right or wrong? What did you do?
I don't think that ever came up for me. But before I move on, I want to say something really quickly about the trusting part.
Yes.
Because the key to really developing self-trust is and why it's important to do it in your inner world and your outer world, your relationship with yourself and your inner world and
Yeah.
your outer world, is because it really has to get into your like subconscious awareness.
Mm,
So a lot of times people think, right? They consciously are thinking about things they can do to trust themselves. And those things aren't actually working because it hasn't landed in their subconscious mind yet, right?
yeah.
So the more activities that, or the more ways of being, whatever it is that you can do that connect the inner and the outer world, those are like the most powerful ways to trust yourself because it's going to happen subconsciously. You don't have to do anything about it. It's just going to happen on its own because you have um like bridged your inner and your outer. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of it this way. Like sometimes if we have, are you saying like if we have a call to do something, say for some reason you said something came into you to take a different route home from work than you usually do. And
Mm-hmm.
you just go, okay. And you just go the alternate route, even if there's no real reason, it doesn't necessarily make sense as to why. And then later on in the news, you find out that your original route had an accident. And so now you've acted on what the inner wisdom was, and now you have,
Absolutely.
okay,
That's a great example. Yes, yes, because so many people focus on what they can do,
mm,
right? Outwardly,
right,
consciously. But all the power is in what is in our subconscious.
yeah,
So it's about priming and positioning ourselves to like receive subconsciously and then letting it do what it's going to do. You
yeah.
know, letting it do what it's going to do. Yeah.
So I have to ask you about that too, because a
Mhm.
lot of people, like they said, priming ourselves. A lot of people wonder about the clarity part.
Mm.
And I know as we go deeper in the conversation, don't worry, everybody, she's going to tell us about the clairs and we're going to talk about all of the ways you translate personally. But this clarity aspect,
Mm.
how important is it for us to be, say, clear channels?
Mm.
And what does that
Mhm.
even mean? And, and,
Right.
and what causes us to be unclear? Like what are the
Mm.
distortions?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I think for me, what I recognize is like biases, personal biases and
Mm,
judgments, like all these things that we categorize, that we judge essentially,
yep.
really get in the way. And so it's really important to be as open-minded as possible, and especially about things that are not familiar to you, things that are out of the religion or you were raised in,
Yeah.
or, beliefs that go against what your family ingrained in you your entire life about people, culture, like
Yep.
life, spirituality. Like you really have to live in the unknown with all those things, because what we know is so little, and your intuition will show you like what aspects of all those things are true for you,
Yeah.
if it's how you relate to a particular archetype or what you get out of your natal chart, right?
Yeah.
Like It's going to be different for everyone, or something more practical about like how you're managing a relationship that you have with your family members, right?
Right.
Like it's gonna show up for you in ways that you relate, but you have to allow yourself to just release all the things that you think
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and really live in the unknown in that way. And there was something else you said that I wanted to comment on, but so many things were coming in my brain. Um,
Clarity. How do we,
oh,
yeah, yeah.
clarity. So, that's a good one. So, I guess in the beginning, right, it's really important not to worry or think about like right or wrong. Oh, you asked me if I prime myself, if I
Yes.
like to about a yes, and I have an example for that I'll share. But it's really important to like just be not focus on an outcome,
Hmm.
right? Because if you're desiring things to end up a certain way,
Yes.
that alone is going to throw you off.
Yes.
That's going to throw you
Yes.
off, right? Because it's going to show up in a way you didn't think about. And
Hmm.
so if you think that you know how this is going to happen, yeah, of course, it could happen that way. It absolutely could. It doesn't mean that it can't.
Yeah.
But what would be most powerfully, most harmonious, most aligned with what the person is desiring, like overall, may show up differently than this other way, right?
Yeah.
Which could even create different timelines for the person. So I really think it's in when it comes to clarity, and accuracy, like just don't have an outcome. Do your best to not have an outcome. And as people are developing their intuition, they're not going to be accurate all the time, right? But
Yeah.
you can learn from when you were inaccurate because you can reflect on, okay, what happened that made me think differently? So on your example about someone driving home and being told to go like a different route, say they didn't.
Hmm.
Say they
Right.
didn't go a different route, right?
Yeah.
And they're in traffic for 2 hours, right? Because they didn't go the different route. Like they can reflect on that and think about why didn't I go a different route? Like what made me not listen to what was telling me to go this other way? And like identify that thing, like really pinpoint it, and then use it as a learning opportunity because I've said before, it's like intuition is definitely a muscle. It's like a muscle, and
Right.
so you have to exercise it. And there will be different like stages,
Yeah.
which I guess brings me to the levels, but there'll be different stages that get you to more and more accuracy. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
it does.
Yeah.
I want you to tell a story about the priming,
Oh, yes.
but I don't want to forget to ask you this really quickly.
Okay.
With what you're saying, it always reminds me of how a lot of times we say, "Oh shoot, I knew it," or "Oh, I had a feeling," and how even unconsciously, the
Mhm.
not trusting ourselves intuitively adds to us not trusting ourselves because we
Yes,
have so many instances of saying like, "Oh man, I shoulda, I woulda, I coulda." But then
absolutely.
this beauty of what you're saying of like really not being attached to the outcome,
Mhm.
it reminds me of like working with Oracle. Like, can you handle the truth? Like I always tell people, like, don't even try to read the cards unless you are open to
Oof.
receiving information that's not necessarily what you want. Can you handle the potential that
Yes.
information may be different than what you want it to be,
Oh
but it's
my
still
goodness.
a support?
Yep.
Yeah. So could you, I want to ask you about that, like how information is a support if
Hmm.
we don't right or wrong it, so to speak, but then
Yes.
also tell us about your priming.
Yes. Oh, I love that example you shared. That's so good. And that's a great way to think about it,
Yeah.
because um it's if you are someone who is having those experiences all the time and you're having that kind of inner conversation with yourself about, oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Yeah.
knew, da 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 da. Like recognize that all of that are examples of you not trusting yourself,
Yes.
right? And that is living, and the reason it's coming out is because that's what's inside of you subconsciously.
Yeah.
So when you hear that kind of thing, when your listeners hear that kind of thing is coming up for them, like recognize that, oh, this is living in my subconscious that I don't trust myself. So this is like one place that I can work on trusting myself,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Um, so the priming thing. So this was even not that long ago, maybe last summer. Um, I asked to see a sign, a very specific sign. I asked to see sunflowers.
Mm.
right? And I was like, when I see sunflowers, I will know that that is, for me, that is an indication that how I'm processing this experience intuitively is accurate because it was a really tricky thing I was trying to navigate. And this is actually in the book. My nephew and I, he came to visit me from Philly. We're walking to this restaurant for lunch, like New York City summer, gorgeous day. It's probably like a 20-minute walk. And I'd never walked to this particular restaurant before. I always like I'm in a car going there because it's far. It's a little far, but it was a beautiful day. So we walked. And on the walk, we passed one particular block. And I was like, oh no, let's turn around and go up this block. We literally turned around and walked up another block. And on that block, there was a bed of sunflowers.
Wow.
A bed of sunflowers. And this is like a dirty, dingy, New York City block, graffiti, like maybe a couple of houses with people living in them, but like not much. And the
Yeah.
houses were apart. And we saw sunflowers. So then we have lunch. After lunch, we decide to go to my favorite park. And so we go to the park, we do our thing in the park. As we're leaving the park and we leave the park, the same entrance that we entered, we leave the park. And the park has a lot of entrances, right? We leave the same place we entered. And my nephew says to me, oh, did we see those sunflowers when we came in? There were more sunflowers that I missed.
Wow.
I missed when we walked in the park because I thought my sign of the sunflowers from, a few hours. Um, I will, oh, you froze for a second. There you are.
Yeah, yeah. You
I
notice
will,
the sunflowers.
yeah, I
Yeah.
will. You froze for a second, so I don't know how much you heard.
You came out of the park, or your nephew pointed out the sunflowers that you had
Oh,
missed. Yeah.
yes. And I was saying that I didn't even pay attention to the second
Yeah.
set of sunflowers because I got my message with the first set, but like there they were again,
Yeah.
sunflowers. And so I will prime myself in that way. Like for me, I can be very visual in my guidance.
Yeah.
And so I will ask for it that way. And so for listeners, if they know how they like to receive information, for some people it could be angel numbers. For some people it could be synchronicities. For some people it could be alignment with, timing. If you know that that's like how you resonate, that, oh, spirit is strongly communicating with me, then that's how you can kind of prime yourself.
Yeah. I was going to say that sounds like a good way of getting people to trust,
Mm,
because there is something where it's not like it's just
mm.
information coming into me and I have to determine if I'm right. If I
Right.
specifically say, please give me the sign, and then I do notice these things, I
Mhm.
think that does feel like a nice priming of like, ah, okay, this stuff really does work.
It does.
This is true.
And intuition is guidance.
Right.
It's guidance. And so that guidance can show up in so many ways.
Yeah.
Using
Yeah.
any of our senses, the guidance can show up. So
I
being
love that.
open-minded to that also is really important.
So it's information and it's guidance. I think,
Yeah.
again, this is a beautiful way of helping us to understand it because I think people put a lot of projection on what
Mhm.
intuition is
Mhm.
and don't necessarily look at it as part of our design,
Yeah.
where they look at it as, I don't know, like only some people can have this ability.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that
Mhm.
development within yourself.
Mhm.
So was it something that you started to notice that
Mhm.
you were intuitive, or was it something that you sought out to develop?
I definitely noticed it because there were just so many things going on that were showing me all day long. Like I could not ignore it, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And I think the story I shared on the last podcast about me learning I was clairtangent, like
Yeah.
after that, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yes.
Really? Really? I cannot deny that this is just who I am.
Yes.
But previous to that, it was just showing up like in my life in all these ways. And I was listening to it, like I
Yeah.
had to learn to be obedient to myself that way because there was a
Mhm.
time I wasn't listening to it. And so it's really important to like just be obedient with yourself, when it comes. And like I said, don't worry about the outcome because it's all like a learning experience and it never ends.
Yeah.
It never ends. It just keeps expanding your awareness of yourself and of life and of all the information and all the guidance that is around us all the time.
Yes. And just so everyone knows, we are going to get into the nitty gritty with Ebony because she not only authored a book to help us develop and recognize our intuition, but she's going to share some with us on the podcast as well. But I have to just point out, I know we'll get to Claire's specifically, but you mentioned being clairtangent.
Mhm.
And that was part of the eruption when you came last time. People were like, I have never heard of clairtangency. Wait a minute, wait a minute. It was like you dropped this intuitive
I love
nugget
that.
that a lot of people hadn't heard of. So I want, just in case anyone hasn't heard it or doesn't remember from then,
Okay.
if you could talk a little bit about being clairtangent and how intuition has helped you with even again making the pivots that you've made since we've spoken to you last.
So many things, so many stories, so many
Yes.
stories. So, being clairtangent. So, clairtangent means clear touch. It's one of the seven clear senses that we are aware of now. There may be more as we evolve, you know. And what can I tell you about it? Do you want to know like how I learned it and tell that story again?
Yes,
Or
yes.
oh, the story. Oh, the story. It's a long story, you guys. So, I have been going to this woman's house who's a Reiki master. And she would have all kinds of spiritual gatherings about all kinds of topics with people from every walk of life, you know? And it was probably like 25 of us max in her living room, overflowing to her dining room, right?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine told me about her because that friend had fibroids and had issues with her fibroids, and this woman helped her get rid of her fibroids, right? So, I was going to these meetings, and one day, I don't know how long I'd been going to her meetings, but she and I developed a friendship, and I would like hang out with her for lunch and just we would just spend time. You know, she's older than me, and like I just like having people in my life at different ages, you know.
Yeah.
And so, I had scheduled an appointment to do a service that she offers, you know, and um, when I show up at her house, she's ready to attune me to Reiki.
Mm,
And so even though I wasn't interested at all in Reiki and not even sure how much I knew about Reiki at that time, because I wasn't doing anything to like spiritually care for myself in 2012. You know, I
yeah.
think that's the year I just started doing yoga. Um, she was ready to attune me to Reiki. So I just followed her lead, you know, and really out of respect for her because like she had prepared herself spiritually for
Right,
this.
right.
So like I can't just ignore what she's done for me to prepare for me. So out of respect for her, I followed her guidance and we're doing Reiki in the park in Brooklyn. And this man comes over, a Jewish man. He had on a yarmulke, tall. I can like still see him in my head to this day. Tall, skinny. And he said, "What are you doing? Do you want to practice?" And so he lays on in the grass, and I just start doing what I had learned how to do. And I got all this information about his wife and his daughter. And so I start talking to him and I'm telling him like very personal information. And by the time I started at the sole of his feet, and by the time I got to the top of his head, it's like this whole story about this experience he was having that was really needing to like manage and heal from, you
Yeah.
know? And so the man says to me, "You know, you are exactly right. How did you know all of this?" Because he was silent the whole time.
Yeah.
So as I'm talking, he's not saying a single word. He's like, "How do you know all of this?" And I said, "I have no idea. You know, I have no idea. Those are my exact words. I have no idea. I've never done this in my
Yeah.
life, you know?" And so, ever since then, you know, I was confused about what it was for years. I used to tell people that my Reiki, my sessions were like Reiki,
Hmm.
but I'm talking.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
because I didn't know the word clairtangent at all. And so as I started to like educate myself more about what this is, and really taking it more seriously too, because I don't think I really took it that seriously. You know, I
Right.
was like, oh, cool, this is happening. Oh, nice. You know,
Yeah.
this is great. But I didn't really take it seriously for a while. And then as I started to take it more seriously and understand myself and all the other things that connected to this, I was like, oh, I'm clairtangent. Like,
Mm.
oh, that's what this is, I was even
Yeah.
practicing at this place in Brooklyn called Minka. And I remember with the owner, a woman named Aki, I believe is her name. For all the practitioners there, she makes you share a session with her. She
Mm.
needs to see like what you do. And
Right.
and we were trying to describe, and we were putting me on her website. We were like, how do we talk about this? Like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? You know?
Uh-huh.
And so she didn't even know the word clairtangent either. And that was a long time ago. But yeah, that's how all of this started for me.
Well, I love that even in this story, it pointed back to you getting to know yourself. It
Hmm.
seems like all of this work, whether we're coming from the lens of Reiki, intuition, yoga, these things,
Yeah.
there's this beautiful way that
Mm.
these practices and things that we may do, life is trying to get us to know ourselves, but that you also trusted your way.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, I had to learn that.
Right.
I mean, I had to learn that, and that was long before my healing journey really started.
Hmm.
I processed my healing as like a rolling thing over several years,
Yeah.
but for me, it really started when it came out of my mouth because I repressed it.
Yeah.
So that was 4 years before it came out of my mouth. So I think
Yeah.
it's just so strongly who I am
Yes.
that it was showing up to me in all these ways, because it's also very much connected to my life purpose.
I have to take this is just a side note, and we will get
Yeah.
to like, other things you do like yoga nidra. Your voice is so calming and soothing. I'm like, man,
Oh,
you must be great with yoga nidra. This is just a little side note. But
thank you.
yeah, it's
I feel the same way
incredible.
about yours. You have a lovely,
Oh, thank you,
soothing
my
voice
love.
too. Yeah.
Listen, people say they like it in meditation. I'm like, I'm glad it worked out for
Yeah.
something because I don't know. Um, but I wanted to ask you before we wrap up this hour together
Yeah.
about the different levels of intuition.
Hmm.
So, could you talk a little bit about what this is again, so we can kind of even start that breaking away from the myth that
Yes.
it's just one thing, one size fit all?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And, I came to understand intuition as levels probably like 4 years ago or so,
Wow.
because before then I didn't think of it that way. But like my Virgo brain,
Yeah.
needed to categorize things. And I think of it as beginner, intermediate, and advanced,
Mm,
because I'm of the belief that everyone is using their intuition all day, every day, even
yeah.
if they don't know it,
Yeah.
right? And most of that usage is at the beginner level.
Mm, okay.
It's those small things that you may not even notice that lead you to do whatever it is that you're doing. And when we speak about intuition, the information from intuition being guidance, that leads us to our desires. It doesn't have to be some major desire, like, you winning the lottery, right?
Right,
It
right.
can be a really small desire, like what you want to eat for lunch, like what experience you want to have, going home, what you want to hear on the radio. It could be something's really small too. So,
Yeah.
so at the beginner level, everyone is doing it in those ways that they are aware of and unaware of, right? Depending on their level of awareness and their relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
At the intermediate level, I think about people who know what intuition is, because a lot of people at the beginner level don't even know what intuition is,
Yeah.
right? At the intermediate level, it's definitely people who know what intuition is, and they have a relationship with their intuition, and they recognize like when it's happening, when it's not, but maybe they don't follow it all the time. They ignore it. They don't trust themselves,
Yeah.
all the barriers, right?
Hmm.
And then at the advanced level, I think about people who don't have any more barriers to it.
Hmm.
It's all the people who are the clairvoyants, people like me. It's the tarot card readers. It's those amazing astrologers. It's all the people getting information
Yes.
and all the abstract ways that they get them.
Yeah.
There are people in Brazil who get information throwing cowrie shells. That's their intuition, right?
Yes.
So it varies from culture to culture, but it's all those ways that we get information like spiritually and all those spiritual practitioners that are sharing all this stuff with us,
Yeah.
they're all using their intuition.
Okay, Ebony, this is, as you're saying, this is coming to mind
Yeah.
because you keep bringing us back to our intuition, it's information. And I
Yeah.
love the simplicity of this.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of how in this realm, I mean, a lot of us don't even notice the information that's literally surrounding us in the physical.
I know. I
Yeah.
know.
So, like,
I
when people
know.
may think, like, oh, I don't think I'm intuitive, it's like, okay, well, are you even aware of like what's around you? Like,
Yeah.
even when we're driving home from work, say, or driving anywhere, sometimes you don't realize what was in your surroundings from point A to point B because we're so
Yeah.
distracted all the time. So, I
Yes.
wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. When you are tuning in, or have you had to develop a way of being more focused to
Mm.
be more
Mhm.
in relationship with your intuition?
I love that question because it speaks to something I wanted to say earlier, but I
Okay.
didn't say as much as I wanted to. So no, I don't think I do that because it's really important for people to like not try, you know?
Yeah.
You really just have to trust.
Hmm.
And all the ways that we want to like try, put all that energy into your trust and it'll be amazing, what is revealed to you. So no, I've never done it that way, but I'm sure it could work that way for people. I mean, I know some people are so logical and,
Yes.
pragmatic. And so things will work differently for different types of personalities and the way different, people process information. But if you could just allow yourself to like to not try and to expand your awareness, because that's really what it's about. I mean, if there's anything you're gonna try, I guess it would be in the expanding of your awareness.
Yep.
And that can be something really simple by doing what you just suggested on your way home from work. Instead of it's the same route. You probably know what you're going to see. You see that, you know where the sign is, that house that stands out, that tree that you like, the light is coming, the stop sign is there, whatever it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
Like just allow yourself to see those things because the way intuition works is, it's not going to like magically present anything to you. It's going to present it in the things that you are seeing all day, every day. It's going to it's your awareness is now heightened. And
Mm.
because you have a heightened sense of awareness, what you're seeing all day, every day, you're now seeing differently.
Yes. Oh, I
Does
think
that
that's
make
like
sense?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just seeing you, that example reminds me of, I say, like in doing this work, prior to doing this work, if I went outside and I saw a tree, I'm like, okay, there's a
Yeah.
tree. Who
Right.
cares? Whereas now I look at a tree and I'm thinking of, that it also has a consciousness and
Right.
the brilliance of the tree and how it will lose leaves and regenerate new one. All these, but with a reverence. So it's not like
Yes.
the tree is any different, but my awareness and my way
Yes.
of perceiving it has changed.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's exactly how intuition works.
Mhm.
It's really simple. So it's abstract in that
Yeah.
way, but it's going to present through whatever is around you all day, every day. You don't have to do anything, look for anything, create anything, put up an altar. No, it's
Yeah.
going to show up. It could show up at the person in line, like it's going
Yeah.
to be anything. It could be anything.
Well, I think you're going to help people alleviate a lot of pressure around the idea
Oh, nice.
that there's like a lot that has to be done. But I will say this, even that is a practice of trusting ourselves again, coming back to the
Hmm.
trust that you
Hmm.
don't have to do anything. So
Yeah.
again, something I always say about Reiki, like my first
Mm.
incredible session was when I had just gotten sick of trying.
I
And I
love
went
that.
into a session kind of like, I don't even care. I was just like, let me
Yes.
just, And when I got out of the way in that way, when I wasn't trying, that's when it was incredible. But I don't know if
Yes.
anyone, yeah, that was
And
by
and
accident.
taking it back to the information thing,
Yeah.
if it's also important to shift your perspective. Is it perspective or perception? It might be both of life, right?
Mm.
Because we're so busy doing the thing, to do the next thing
Yeah.
that we don't recognize that all around us is information,
Hmm.
right? There is information. And so if you can start to think about life, and all the things we're walking around and seeing and doing and smelling, going back to our senses, all that's giving us information. If you're in
Yes.
Starbucks and you smell the coffee, right? That's telling you that you're smelling coffee. That's information, right?
Yeah.
So just thinking about everything as being informative in that way is another way to help people easily connect with and expand their intuition because that little shift will shift how you're experiencing your life,
Right.
you know?
So this
Yeah.
I think is going to be like a beautiful segue into the clairs. And you talk a lot about our body being a tool for information, which is actually, very linked to the name of your business, Body Way Intuition. Yeah.
Yes.
And so,
That's where it came from. That's
is
where,
it?
yeah, yeah.
So I do want to get more into this with you about the body as the tool and talking
Mhm.
about the clairs. And, but before we go into that episode, I do have to ask, you may have had a very particular vision. I think when we did meet in 2023, there were some things you shared about what was going on in your life and what the next
Mm.
goals were and this type of thing. And now you have this incredible book that's coming out.
Mhm.
You even mentioned like making some shifts around what was presented in the book.
Yeah.
How did your intuition support you in these pivots in the last couple of years? And I ask this because a lot of people don't associate intuition with the practical day to day.
Yes, yes, that's such a good question. So, goodness. So with the book, I guess where should I start? Because there's the book and then there's like the body way intuition business
Yeah,
and they
give us
both
both.
came. So with the book, when I was editing it, the publisher's like, oh, they go through the whole thing and they tell you, we want you to say more about this, less about this. We want to change this. And they really didn't have too many things that they wanted me to change, which I was really happy about.
Yeah,
So much, I mean, all of the book is like me, you know?
yeah.
They just help me say these things better and explain myself better. So, initially the clairs weren't in the book at all. I didn't mention them at all because
Wow.
I really wanted intuition to be more for the beginner level person.
Hmm.
I wanted the average Joe, and in particular, someone who doesn't think they're intuitive, doesn't believe in it. I really wanted that person. It's
Yes.
one piece of hair, I just noticed. I really wanted that person to like receive the book. But it just never kind of it just didn't feel right to me. Like it's such a big part of who I am in my intuitive experience. And so when they asked me to rewrite, they gave me free reign, to like add to, not rewrite, but to add to.
Yeah.
And so I ended up adding like all the stuff about the clairs in the intro. It's in the intro mostly.
Hmm.
And it just led me to like opening up the floodgates. I wrote so much more. I doubled the word count to the book.
Wow.
I doubled the word count. So
Wow.
it like there's just so much more information in there now that wasn't there before, based on like me focusing on like myself more and honoring myself more and thinking about like this is just all about my experience that I'm sharing. And before I was more thinking about it as I'm giving information to people, but no, I'm like I'm sharing my experience with people. I can't leave this out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the book is so much more robust because I've included that. It
Hmm.
impacted so many, like every other chapter in the book has, I don't want to like talk too much about it, but it's just really enlivened the book.
Yeah.
And with the business, this is such a, so with the business, so my last website was just my name, ebonybanks.me. And I was ready to redo my website. I didn't even know what the name was going to be. And as I was ready to redo my website, I had been thinking about a woman who used to live in my old apartment building. Probably like 2 weeks prior, I'd been just thinking about her and wondering about her, how she's doing, right? I get an email from her in my inbox. She's now doing a whole nother business because at that time she had a model casting agency that she owned and ended up selling, right?
Wow.
She now no longer lives in New York, is on the West Coast doing a whole nother business, and she designs websites, right? She's-
That's an interesting pivot.
right. So when
Yeah.
and this is all I've been thinking about her. I've been wanting a new website, like all these things. I was thinking about my branding, and she's like a branding genius too. So she ended up helping me with the website. She does not helping me. I mean, she designed the whole thing.
It's beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. It's all due to her. I just told her like what I wanted and we agreed on colors and she ran with it. She was amazing. And so now like I have this amazing website and then as a because she's such a marketing genius, I thought I was just getting a website and she was like helping me create a whole business,
Right. New
because
brand.
my brand, because I
Yeah.
had already been sharing readings with people and doing intuition coaching, but I didn't think about it as a business.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it as a brand. It was like, oh, this thing I do on the side,
Hmm.
you know?
Yes.
And I didn't connect it to the books and I just didn't, I don't know why, but I just didn't like put it all together. And
Yes.
so she just really helped me put it all together. And it was like me thinking about her, getting this email from her, and I hadn't heard from her. I can't even remember. It had been over 5 years we'd been in touch,
Wow. Wow.
So
Yeah.
all that I recognize as my guidance.
Yes.
And I hope those are good examples of how it can show
Yeah.
up in your practical life.
Yeah. So what really stands out with what you're saying is the spaciousness. And it
Mm,
kind of reminds me of what you were sharing with us earlier about the importance of being
mm,
like unattached, like not attached to the outcome, not having some very rigid expectation. But when we have that spaciousness, and it was like you had some wonder in there,
hmm
and
hmm
even when suggestions were made, again, it just feels like you weren't rigid. You weren't
hmm
preventing
Right.
like the co-creation of whatever was unfolding, even if you had no idea what that was.
Oh,
So
that's such a good
yeah.
way to think about it.
Hmm.
Okay, I like that. And that's probably what I was doing. I mean, I just what I'm understanding, based on what you're saying, and what I know is true for me,
Yeah.
when I create an intention or when I a desire,
Yeah.
let's go with desire. When I have a desire about something, my it can once I'm firm in that, like I just let it go. And then it can show up like however it shows up is how it shows
Yes.
up. And so in
Yes.
those two instances, like I had the desire to include the clairs, but
Hmm.
I was being too rigid and like, no, who I want this book to go to and what I want this book to be
Right.
about, right? And then by including it, I double the word count and the book is like so much better than it was before, right?
Yeah.
And I did all this very quickly. I was just like at my computer, like it just all came out of me. Even the publisher, when they got the second version, they were like, "Oh my goodness,"
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
And I
Yes.
was like, I was like, "Thank you for pulling all this out of me." So, yeah, I think that's how it was working for me, which says a lot about how it can work for all of us, right? Like,
Yeah.
because we can often hold our desire in a very rigid place. Like we
Mhm.
want this. We want it to be this way at this time with this person, even,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Yeah.
crazy. And then, we hold on to it too tightly and we don't allow like all the energy and all the influences, all the non-physical influences to get us to this thing intuitively.
Yes.
We don't allow them because we're too much in our like physical rigidity around how it's going to happen and how we think about it.
Oh, 100%. It reminds me of how a lot of people talk about co-creating with the universe.
Mm,
And, hearing you say this, Ebony, I'm thinking a lot of people may not even realize how helpful the intuition is in that process.
yeah.
But to your point, we wouldn't even recognize the other
Mm,
information if we're so locked in
yeah.
on just one particular thing. How
Mhm.
would you have no, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't even allow yourself, you know, to see it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't allow yourself that level of awareness,
Yes. Well,
because you're so constricted.
let's give them a little teaser leading us
Okay.
into our second conversation because
Okay.
a lot of people do have an idea
Hmm
that to be intuitive or psychic, it means that you, I don't know, see apparitions. Like people think, like I can tell you what your future boyfriend looks like. I can, certain ideas we have about the predictive quality or
Some
again,
people can do that though.
yes, some
Some people,
people can, but it's not the only way.
it's not the only way, right?
And it's not only that you can
hmm
see,
hmm
you know, spirits or something like this. Yeah.
hmm
So I know that you're going to talk to us about the ways that we may perceive
hmm
and what that even means for us in terms of recognizing the information,
hmm
translating the information,
Mhm.
I just want to ask you before we get to that episode,
Yeah.
does that make a lot of difference for people when they realize even that, like we're saying, not being rigid, when they
Mhm.
recognize, oh, there's a bigger window
Mm.
of what intuition really is?
Absolutely. I think so. I think so. I listened to our last call and I said absolutely so many times. I'm trying not to say it's just the first thing that goes to me. Yes. So let me just say yes. Um, yes, because it expands your worldview,
Hmm.
and when that expands, I mean, it's like you're shifting your own reality,
Yes. Oh,
you
shifting our
know?
own reality.
Yeah, and people talk
Yeah.
about like realities and co-creation and all these things. I don't know. Do people talk about? I kind of I'm connecting it to manifestation for some. Well, I
Mhm.
guess yeah, that makes sense, right? Because people think about manifesting and they're creating their own reality.
Right.
But yeah, so I need this journey to like understanding yourself better and getting to know yourself better. You are absolutely shifting your reality.
Yeah.
And it's in such a beautiful, loving way. And there are 2 points I want to make before we move on to the next
Please.
segment. I want to talk a little bit about desire because I
Okay.
know there are some spiritual like schools of thought that I agree with to some, but not totally, that talk about how like wanting anything and desiring
Uh,
anything is like, we should live in a space where we don't want anything,
hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's lots of folks who believe that, right?
Yes.
And while I understand it, I should say, I don't agree because when I talk about desire and the desires that your intuition is guiding you to, like I said a little while ago, it can be the small things, right, as
Hmm.
well as the big things. Um, and a lot of people think of that word desire as like they make it so much bigger than it is. And so I just want to be clear that the reason I think desire is healthy and wanting, are they the same? Want and desire. I think that they're close. They're very close,
Yeah.
if not the same. But the reason I think those things are healthy is because it expands who you are.
Hmm.
Like if we could liken it to having a job at work and someone starting off at like in the mailroom, right?
Yes.
And then that person wants another position in that company. And you hear about these kind of stories. I don't nothing in particular
Yeah.
is coming to mind, but like working your way up, right?
Yes.
And a position that like impacts you having a better quality of life.
Yeah.
That's why I think desire is healthy. And for some reason people think of desire, sometimes they get it confused with vice and like so I just wanted to be clear about what desire is and why I
Yeah.
think desire is healthy. It just expands your ability to know yourself because in desire, you then have to be different, right? You have to think about something differently. You have to learn more. You have to do something differently. You have to expand some part of you
Yep.
to match what it is that you're desiring. And so I think that like it's personal development and expansion is healthy, you know?
Let me tell you something. I agree 100%. I actually had a conversation about desire with a group I
Mm-hmm.
work with called the Alchemy Circle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exactly what you're saying, Ebony. And it was from the lens of, I think mm, maybe sometimes confusion for us is we can have desire, but we often attach to it, just like you were saying earlier. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of attaching to it, just
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to be more of a motivating factor. I think when we desire or we want, it can be that thing that gives us that aspiration to evolve, move forward, have new experience, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And that type of feeling also brings about a sense of purpose, a sense of like looking forward to something, whatever it may be, which is
Yeah.
all beautiful. But I think once we attach, that's when it can get problematic. But it
Mm.
also, I think, when we desire, just like in your example of your life, once you
Mm-hmm.
want something and you don't become rigid, it becomes magnetizing. I think it's part
Mm-hmm.
of that creative force that we have. So I'm with you.
Absolutely. All these things are happening in our energy, because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we are energy.
right.
We are energy. And when you expand your awareness and you line up with, what you really want and what is true for you and allow yourself to see all those things, you're just magnetizing yourself to all these different energies. So these things can show up in your 3D life, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I think a big part of the adventure of our lives is figuring out and understanding the creative aspects of our nature. Yeah.
That is who we are first and foremost.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
how can we like ignore that part of us? You know,
Yeah.
it's such an integral part of the human experience,
Hmm.
like
No.
being creative.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, I'm glad that we talked about that too, because there may be people like, oh, I never thought of that way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with creativity, some people would think of being creative as like an artist.
Mm,
You've got to have something tangible that you
right.
can show. But the most powerful creativity is the stuff that nobody sees. It's your thoughts. It's your thoughts. It's what's
Right.
going on in your inner world. It's your inner self-talk. Like
Yes.
that is where people should focus their creativity. Like let yourself have a new thought,
Let me
right?
tell you something, babe. After we do this series about the intuition, you're going to have to come back a whole nother day just so we could talk about the energy of creativity, okay?
Yes.
Because you and
Yes.
I could go down a whole rabbit hole on that. But I
Yeah.
have to say, this was a great setup for
Yeah.
now. Let's like open up into how our body really is a tool for
Hmm.
our intuitive understanding,
Hmm.
development, and these clairs, because a lot of people at this point have heard clairs, but
Hmm.
again, may not have a broad scope of understanding of what they mean, how
Hmm.
to recognize them within ourselves, but we're going
Hmm.
to get all of that from you.
All of that.
So,
Yes.
everyone, I hope you enjoyed this first hour. Thank you, Ebony. We will be
Yes.
back.
Thank you.
Join us on Wednesday to understand all about the clairs and your body way intuition.
Yes.
We'll see you next time. Okay, beautiful alchemist. I hope that you enjoyed part one of our week-long conversation with Ebony Banks of Bodyway Intuition. Don't forget, you can learn more about Ebony and her work at bodywayintuition.com and under that same handle at Bodyway Intuition on Instagram. Also, if you would like to pre order her new book, Your Intuitive Nudge, a step by step guide to connecting with your intuition, the link to pre order is down in the show description as well. So, before we go any further, I just want to thank Ebony again for taking the time to deep dive with us so that we can all expand and learn more about the potential within our capability of intuitive recognition. So I also wanted to let you all know as well because the coupon code, the discount will be expiring soon. If you want to join me for the Ultimate Healing Guide that will take place in April, you want to be sure to register before March 15th because that's when the coupon code expires. So if you want to join me for the Ultimate Healing Guide, a 5-week online class, and believe me, now is the time for healing. You can register now and use the coupon code EARLYBIRD as one word to receive $50 off of the enrollment. And then, just go to my website, theenergeticalchemist.com, sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already, so you can always know when there are new classes available. Aside from that, lovebirds, be sure to tune in this Wednesday where we continue the conversation with Ebony, and she talks about feeling being its own language. So much more to learn. I'm excited to share with you. And remember to always journey in love.